and welcome to episode 38 of HardcoreGaming101.net's top 47,858 games of all time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate on Twitter. Xerxes couldn't make it because he's busy tanking the Navy's budget, 3 submarines at a time. My panelists today are...
I'm Bobbinator.
I'm Jeff, the Electric Viking.
And I'm Xerxes, coming to you live from a submarine via satellite in the Balkan conflict of 1998.
On this podcast, we have 3 rules. Rule number 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule number 2, you can nominate one game via a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. We've stopped accepting nominations via Twitter for the foreseeable future. Rule number 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated, but don't nominate games we've already ranked. You can see the master list for yourself. Check out bit.ly/47kgames. Our next game is In the Hunt by developer-publisher Ireme. It was nominated by @DerekB9Aura. So that was via Twitter. And this game was first published in April 1993 in Japan for the arcade. It later got a PlayStation port, a Saturn port, and it even got a Windows 95 port, incredibly. What do we think of In the Hunt?
I like it. I think it's good.
Same. It's really hard. I mean, most arcade shooters at that time are, to be fair, but I liked it. It's got a really neat idea that you don't really see all that often in good games.
I mean, we know, is it related in any way to Metal Slug, or is it just look...
It's super related to Metal Slug in the sense that I'm pretty sure it's the exact same people.
Yeah, I think some of those staff actually broke off and went in to make Metal Slug for SNK.
There are elements. The Metal Slug 3, for anyone who's played the Metal Slug games, but not In the Hunt, you might remember that there is a level where you get into a submarine and you shoot things. That is literally taken from In the Hunt. Like, it's pretty much one-to-one In the Hunt, including the color palette they use for the ships that you shoot, and it's got mines that are very, very similar. Basically, In the Hunt is a proto Metal Slug game in many ways.
If you like Scoon, and if you like Metal Slug, they actually made a game for you.
It's just like 3 people, I think.
All 3 of those people are stoked.
Can I go and describe the gameplay real quick?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Basically, this is a side-scrolling shooter, with the big twist being that you're in a submarine. You have a basic forward-firing weapon, and you have depth charges for shooting things below you, along with torpedoes for shooting things above you. And sometimes you need those because you'll have enemies that attack you from above. You'll be in the water, but you'll have people attacking from the sky, so you have to use your torpedoes to hit them, and it works out pretty well.
So my understanding is, is it a 2 or 3 button? Confirm this for the listeners who haven't played the game.
It is a 2 button. The first button uses your missiles and depth charges, and secondary button uses your upwards torpedoes to hit things above you.
And the interesting thing is, it isn't a shmup because you scroll the game yourself. You can't go backwards, but it is not a auto scroller. You go forward when you choose to. I think that's one of the reasons you actually had trouble with this one, Bob, because we streamed this one on our Twitch account, and you were really pushing hard through this game. You were just holding right as much as possible. If you want to live in this game, it's not the best thing to do. You want to actually take this one at a little bit of a thoughtful pace. Just take out some enemies, go forward a bit, take out some more enemies. And it works actually surprisingly well because you can set your own pace a little bit more. You don't always get overwhelmed. It's got a really cool twist. I just want to say, to finish your description of the weapons, if you're submerged underwater, when you use the upfiring bomb, you release these balloons with shells attached to them that explode on enemies. But if you're sitting on the surface level, you get a cool machine gun that comes out of the top of your ship. So you almost have 3 layers of combat where you sort of have underwater, and then you have to sort of shoot up, but then you also got to get above the water line to shoot enemies above you as well, which makes it very different to a typical shmup. It's not... I can't remember the exact name, but there's a couple of underwater shmups that are very much just regular shmups themed underwater. In the Hunt isn't like that at all. It really genuinely feels like a sort of super arcadey submarine game. It's submarine for realsies.
Yeah, and there's like a weird kind of motion to everything that feels sort of sluggish and not like it's responsive, but not perfectly responsive, like say like a Gradius game or something.
Sure. It responds like you're in water, basically. Like I think they actually pulled off the submerged feel of the game pretty well.
What I was going to say though, real quick, just to say, I feel like the lack of auto-scrolling actually makes it a little bit more difficult, because in other maybe similar games, you're always kind of moving forward. But here, there can be some points where you're just like so pinned down with stuff that it can be hard to actually make any forward progress without dying.
Most of those, I think, are the sort of puzzler segments that you're supposed to figure out how to get through. Because there's bits where you're supposed to shoot things in certain orders that constantly refill the screen. If you've played Metal Slug, you will actually remember there are bits of those games where there's constantly like infinite rockets launching and you have to shoot like a rocket and then jump through the gap. It has moments like that that can be kind of worked out. And some of the bosses are quite challenging in this game. Very cool bosses in this game, by the way. Some very cool stuff. The best boss is the Atlantic. I think it's Chantu or something is the actual name, and it's this statue which is actually full of flesh, and it's really creepy, and it chases you through an entire stage, and it's actually one of the most memorable stages and bosses, I think, in a game that I've seen. It's very, very, very cool. That's level 5.
It is pretty. I mean, this is a very high concept shooter in a lot of ways. Like I would say, like one of the interesting things about it is that we described it similarities to Metal Slug. It also has that weird, like not fluid, but like sliding kind of animation that looks kind of like Flash animation nowadays. That is all over the place, especially in the vehicles in Metal Slug. And it's like one of my it's like I don't know why. I think it's just because it reminds me of Flash animation that I don't particularly like it, but I mean it was intentional. It's not because they made it cheaply or something. It's just no, this game it's not quite Metal. If you're sprite art fan, sure. It's not quite Metal Slug. Like it's not just there yet. You can see the seeds of what they would do for Metal Slug, and it has a very similar, probably scanned in art. They've actually drawn the art, scanned it in, and then pixelated it. It doesn't seem that some of the art was really done by hand on a computer. It might have, but some of the stuff is really texturally detailed in a way that seems like it would be a struggle to do the basics of that. And that's how they end up with that slide effect, is because they kind of just tweak it.
You can kind of tell it's the same art as Metal Slug Team, because everything has this heavily shaded, somewhat grainy look to it, especially the explosions. That's kind of the big sign, I'd say.
I love the explosions in this, though. There's lots of explosions, and they all look fantastic, which is typical of the Metal Slug game. I would say that maybe one of the only faults, they try their best, but because all of the levels are set underwater, there is a slight sameness to the levels. They do feel distinct enough, but you kind of like, yeah, I'm underwater and I shoot other submarines. Like that kind of begins to wear itself thin a little bit as the game plays. And the last level is this really bland sort of metal robot factory, metal like production factory. It's pretty boring for a last level, especially compared to some of the earlier levels, which is, it's a minor complaint. It's just like, yeah, I don't know how you would have done it. They tried their absolute best, but some of the levels eventually blend together. Because it's quite short, too. It's only 6 levels long. It is quite short,
yeah. It doesn't really, the sameness doesn't really get to me when I play it. The difficulty does. It is very, it's weird because when you play this game, I'm not playing like the PlayStation port or something. I'm always just playing it on MAME. And so, of course, I can just feed, Invisa credits to my heart's content. But it doesn't.
Kind of have to. It's very much quarter muncher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the interesting thing is, I'm not quite sure. Sorry, everyone, I didn't bother. But I do know that they remixed the levels a little bit. They changed the order of the levels on the PlayStation release. So I'm not sure if they may have tweaked the game's balance a bit for the home console ports. Because what I noticed from contemporary reviewers at the time, they had called the game too easy. So
what?
Either they're a bunch of gaming gods reviewing these games, or they may have tweaked the consoles to be a little fairer.
Or maybe they just allowed like infinite credits in the console versions, in which case
it's possible.
Yeah.
I would still recommend playing the arcade game because that's clearly the way that the game was intended to play, even if it's a little bit credit hungry. There are playthroughs online of someone playing it all the way through without dying, and they aren't cheating, like you can see that they're actually playing the game. So it is doable. You can get through this game without bankrupting yourself, by bankrupting yourself beforehand.
I think this now be a good time to start ranking this game, and I'm thinking somewhere around maybe Bangai-O?
I can see that. I feel like Bangai-O has a lot more going for it. Like Bangai-O is just a crazy, inventive, bonkers game that whereas I feel like In the Hunt is it's less innovative than it is.
Well, I mean, innovative by what standard? It has unique weapons. The control system is unique. The submarine itself is unique. Like, it just feels...
Cool. Well, yeah, but it doesn't... What I'm saying is, like, they didn't do a whole lot with those things. Like, usually when you've got a gimmick in a shooter, the gimmick is... if they do it right, the gimmick is a big part of the gameplay, and it changes it, and that's what makes it interesting. Like, we talked about stuff like what's the top ranked shooter? Let's take a look here.
It's not R-Type, is it?
We might have put R-Type at the top because we're crazy.
Just Galaga count as a shooter?
Well, yeah, but I'm thinking like scrolling shooters.
R-Type.
I mean, you want to say something like Alien Soldier? That's close enough. I mean, it's not a shmup.
It's a cousin. It's a cousin of it, but
yeah, it's a cousin.
Yeah. I thought for sure there was a game.
Just imagine that they're a game.
No.
Well, because look, we got Armed Police Batrider, which is pretty standard but very, very strong. We got UN Squadron. Like those are all around Bangai-O range, by the way. The kind of higher up ones, we've got Ikaruga is probably, other than R-Type, is the other one.
That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, Ikaruga is a good example. Or what's the other one I always bring up when we bring up Ikaruga? Is it Eliminate Down? Is that it?
That's the Dreamcast game. Is that the one you're thinking of?
I would put In the Hunt a little higher than Ikaruga, just because I like its concept a little bit better.
Do you like making Treasure fans angry though? Is that what you like?
No, look, you can't do it. Like, look, they're both punishingly difficult games, but with Ikaruga, like, there's a very, very interesting mechanic that is nowhere near. Like, this game just gives you like a third option for what you can do with your weapons. Like, it's just Twin Gears Evious, but yeah, it's like, you can. Instead of hitting the bombs, you can hit the surface to air missiles or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, it's cool, but it's not like it really makes a lot out of that. It just really kind of...
There's some very cool set pieces, like when you use your weapons to dig through destroyed skyscrapers, because the plot of this game is the Earth is flooded by a terrorist organization who then built a bunch of ships and took over the world. Like, it's a pretty cool, like, post... Basically, the villains in this game won... And then you're now rebelling against them, and that's the plot, which is very cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know about that part.
Oh, yeah. We have an unusual spat of thematically linked games coming up in the near future, by the way. This is...
But it's very, very neat stuff. But, it is just kind of like the sideways plot.
I mean, the gimmick, for me, like, I'm not terribly adept at shooters, and I'm not even going to pretend otherwise, but for me, the gimmick is, goddamn, the art is, like, very, very, very good. And it's an interesting, like, kernel of Metal Slug stuff, which is some of, I think, the best 2D art that has ever been in a game. And our previous guest, Jonathan Holmes, at some point said in earnest that Metal Slug 3 is the single best-looking video game ever made, which...
You'd be really hard to argue against that point.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't argue against it.
And, like, some of that's in this game, and it's beautiful. And, like, yeah, it's kind of not the most incredibly, like, mechanically... diverse shooter or whatever, but like I could just look at this game and get murdered in it repeatedly and still be pretty happy and keep putting quarters in it.
Yeah. It's okay. Something. So I'm saying like
the real problem. Sorry, I'm going to jump in to just say a little bit. I think the main negatives about this game, because it is very good. As we said, it is very, very short. I think that the last stage is almost throwaway. Like, it's not a very interesting stage. It's pretty boring. There's not any really interesting mechanics. The final boss is very close to approaching a contra wall, which is really disappointing. I hate it when games basically throw out a really, really boring end boss. And the game doesn't really do... it's short, and it doesn't really change itself up all that much. It has little gimmicks per stage, but it's just kind of the same. Like, the enemies don't change that much. Like, most of them are very similar.
So I'm saying... I'd put it in the Blazing Laser, Snatcher, Crystallis, Outrun 2006 range, which is about halfway. I'd say a little higher than halfway on the list.
I'd put it above Blazing Lasers for sure.
I'm okay with that.
I'd put it between Outrun and Crystallis.
Okay, I can live with that.
Going once.
Timestamp.
I'm just thinking it is. This game, it's a tricky one because this one is one of those specific arcade titles that is so arcade. Play this game. If you haven't, go play it. Just don't question it. Just go play this game. But you'll play it and you'll be like, that was cool. I probably won't play it again because that's it. It's done. I'm done. I'm finished with this game. It's good.
For me, what sells this game more than anything is just the theme. And I'm sad that more games don't really do that. That's what really makes this game unique for me, makes it stand out.
Yeah, it's a very, very solid package. I guess it's just missing sort of a 10, 20%, little bit extra boost. The final ranking for this is above Crystallis and below Outrun 2016. That's where we're gonna put it. It's a great game. It's worth playing. That's all I can get from it. It's classic Irem, very good.
It's a looker.
Our next game is Bomberman Hero. It was developed by Hudson Soft and published by Nintendo in the US and Hudson Soft everywhere else. It was nominated on Twitter by @AminonChorion. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I have no idea how you're supposed to pronounce that. The game's earliest release date was April 30th, 1998 in Japan. And to help us out with this one, we have a couple of friends of the podcast, Nameless Fragga and The Gunhot.
What's up, gentlemen?
Hi, I'm Nameless. Let's talk about Bomberman here.
Let's do it.
Let's not talk about Bomberman Hero because this game... So, little history about Bomberman Hero. It was the follow-up, but not really, to Bomberman 64. And it's a single-player Bomberman game, which... I think just saying that in a sentence is kind of like trepidation should fill you.
For those of you playing the home game right now, that means this is a Bomberman game. Let's all really soak this in. It's a Bomberman game with no multiplayer.
I just want to ask, honest question: does anybody like playing Bomberman single player? Anyone?
Depends on the game, because I quite like the single player in Bomberman 64 and the Second Attack, thank you very much.
Saturn Bomberman single player is pretty good.
That's the thing that really catches people, I think, out here, is that Bomberman 64 did have pretty decent single player. It's the kind of single player that you bought the game for multi, and then you play single, it's like, oh, well, I'll finish this. This is pretty fun. So then they released Bomberman Hero, and you're like, all right, you got me. This 64 was pretty good. I guess Hero's gonna be even better. Oh.
I think the first big insult to injury is the fact that Bomberman 64 single player ends on a sequel hook. And then you play Bomberman Hero, which was the very next game, and it has absolutely nothing to do with 64 in any way, shape, or form.
Basically, the plot is someone had watched Star Wars and thought it was a pretty neat idea and put Bomberman in it.
Specifically, the first 5 or 10 minutes of Star Wars Episode 4.
Yeah, someone they had a friend who had watched Star Wars and was explaining Star Wars to him. They're like, "Oh, cool, that's a great intro. I'm just gonna take that intro. It's gonna be really cool. It's gonna work in my Bomberman game." And what? Hold on.
It's like the way a dungeon master would steal an idea and be like, "That'd be good if I just rework it a little bit." Yeah.
And so you get Bomberman, and to this game's credit, and this is where I'll give the game some credit, the transition from grid-based, sort of chunky movement, top-down, side-view Bomberman, they do a pretty good job of getting that physically from that to Bomberman as a platform guy who runs around, jumps, throws bombs, kicks bombs, drops bombs. The explosions are 3D, similar to Bomberman 64, and the core kind of works. Yeah, I don't feel like any specific, like, basic feature of this game is awful. It's like, no, it's fun enough. Bomberman works. Controls are okay.
But
so, just to
no, I was
say,
gonna let someone else.
like, there's so many buts.
I wish there was more butts in this game.
This game, I feel like, is the most. It is a very quintessential N64 game in that it has that. It's not quite to the level of something like Turok. The draw distance in this game is really something. You've got it's almost to the like Tale of the Sun extent, except you can kind of see the world fading in and out. Like whereas Tale of the Sun was this weird lens that was sort of scrolling across the landscape. This is you've got maybe 20 pretend yards of focus around your Bomberman avatar of the world that kind of resolves itself, and the rest of it is in a fog of war.
Like, Tale of the Sun gets away with it because it's this bizarro art game from Dink, so it's like, okay, fine, it's batshit wild, it doesn't matter. It's like Bomberman, you're like, well, I don't get it. Why can't I see slightly further in front of myself? Yeah. It's very strange.
But as a counterpoint to that I'll make for it, you don't really need to worry about it because it's not like most of the enemies in this game are doing much to hurt you anyway. So you're not going to get shot off
screen. The vast majority of them, they just hang out. You know, most of them minding their own business. They're just like, just standing around here, just living life, living the dream.
I like how like one of the enemies is like a chick, like a baby chicken. You just blow it the hell up.
Well, it starts off. This is actually one of my favorite enemies in the game because it's a big chicken and it explodes to a bunch of smaller chickens. And I'm pretty confident that is a motif in several Bomberman games. I'm pretty sure the big chicken becoming smaller chicken is in several other games. And you can kind of tell because some elements of this game are borrowed from previous Bomberman games, and they kind of cute, they kind of look good, they kind of work. And then there's a bunch of original stuff in this game, and you're just like, wow, it's a box with the freaking other boxes attached to it.
This game, to me, feels very, for lack of a better term, 16-bit. I feel like if you rework this, maybe make it like an isometric thing, like, I don't know, Sonic 3D Blast, you could maybe do this on the SNES. It just does not feel like a 64-bit game to me.
Frank, you got something else to say?
Yeah, about those chickens you were talking about. They look so cute, and yet you have to blow them up because of the way the score system works in this game.
Right.
That's right.
Like, all those points you get in the corner, yeah, you have to get at least a certain amount if you want to get a 5 on that level.
And why are those
doing
5s
so
important?
is kind of important.
Yeah.
Well, the 5 is... It unlocks the very, very, very far off bonus levels, right? It's not core to beating the game, if I remember correctly.
They essentially gate the final boss behind getting all those 5 scores, don't they? Like the true ending, like good ending?
Yes, they do.
So it's actually pretty clutch that you murder everything.
But you have to get all the 5s as well? Is that correct? It's been a long time since I finished this game.
Yes, you have to get every 5 in the game to unlock the final area.
And you know that doing so often requires you to get like every single pickup and kill every single thing in the level, or just about.
It's like they sort of got like collectathons and they thought, yeah, collectathons, they're really great. Let's put collectathons in our linear platform game. No, stop, don't do that. That's horrible.
Ugh.
I just realized one of the worst things is that it basically just makes every level take much longer to complete than it should, instead of, say, rewarding you for playing it really well.
Or fast. Like, I feel like you could speedrun some of these levels and probably have a good time instead of playing the like OCD Bomberman who just has to kill everything. It's like, wow, that's exciting.
Oh, the worst part, though, just real quick. If you die, there are no checkpoints, I'm pretty sure. And it can be easy to, like, slip off of a platform and have it so Bomberman won't grab the ledge, you just die, and you just got, like, all that stuff all over again.
Counterpoint to that is you did mention that Bomberman actually grabs ledges in this, which is surprisingly thoughtful. I didn't expect that from a game of this sort of quality level, that he does actually grab ledges. So Bob had mentioned that this game feels like a 16-bit game, and the Gunheart, who's right here, but did a little bit of research and found out that the engine is not the Bomberman 64 engine, as you might expect if you played both of them. It's actually the engine that they were making in 1995 for a follow-up 3D Bonk game. And for some reason, instead of just making more Bomberman 64, they thought to themselves, let's make a single-player Bomberman with leftover code from 1995, and we'll just make a Bomberman game on that.
Can you guys imagine how clumsy Bonk's principal dive headbutt attack would be in 3D?
God.
God.
It would be you wouldn't even be able to tell where he was going.
Yeah, it's this game does have shadows. They're not completely moronic. This is another one of those 3D games where they did give you shadows so you can actually see what's going on. Can I add to this is the way the game works and the point system again? The point system ensures that in order to beat the game properly, you have to cheese every single boss. You can't even play the bosses properly. You have to basically bug them out so that they can't kill you very quickly or easily, so that you just keep spamming bombs. You just keep throwing bombs at them nonstop, because that's the only way to get the boss defeated in the time limit to get the highest score you need to finish the game. This game basically undermines itself as you play it, which is, wow, that's impressive. Also, the power-ups in this game suck.
We haven't even really gotten to the worst part about this game, and this game is just really, really dull. This is the most white bread platformer.
Good thing you play as White Bomberman.
Sure. And it's even right down to the music, which, a couple of reviews at the time seemed to have some nice things to say about it, and I think they're all insane.
If you took the music out of the game and just played it to me, I'd be like, yeah, that's all right. I don't hate this. But there's 6 or so music tracks in the whole game, and the game has 50 levels, and it just cycles. Just each level just has one of those songs. They don't even bother trying to theme them to the levels. They're just this plays. Basically, you finish the first planet. I think you've heard most of the songs in the game, and it just keeps throwing those songs back at you. And it's really? I don't know. I've heard this song 18 times now, please. I just can't listen to it anymore. It's so slow, and it's not even exciting. It is basically proto-Chillwave as far as I'm concerned. It's really slow and tedious.
Yeah, and I'm actually inclined to like that stuff, and dear God, don't sample from this game.
It especially falls flat compared to 64's soundtrack, which had a lot of nice melodic music to it.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool how they snuck in some of the old Bomberman tunes and sound effects, though.
Some leitmotifs, but...
Yeah. It's interesting to me because it's, Hudson didn't do a lot of games in this era that are of this kind. They made a few really great games, including a great N64 game, which is Star Soldier Vanishing Earth, which is very, very good. But this game is not. So it feels to me like a very Hudson 3D platformer. It's very much like their early platformers for the NES in a weird, updated way.
I also get the sense that this might have just been a stop fill where they released Bomberman 64 and they were like, wow, that actually was really well received. Let's get another one out. And they just kind of grabbed whatever they could and then just blew out this game that's not very interesting. It has a bunch of mini game levels just to try and distract you from how boring this game is, because you get a sort of Star Foxy sort of behind the back style level, which is really, really bland and just I don't even want to play it. You get that, but underwater. You go snowboarding for some reason, which I don't know if this was because maybe they had saw our snowboard kids or something and went, yeah, cool, we'll just put that in Bomberman for no reason. And you get to be a helicopter and you get to ride Louie, which is another throwback. Louie shows up and he's fun. That's a nice level that you actually get to have a little bit of fun with until it immediately dismisses Louie and you don't see him again for most of the game.
So when we rank this, I want to make another point.
Okay.
1998 was a really bad year putting out a mediocre platformer. You had to compete with Crash 3, Banjo-Kazooie, Spyro the Dragon.
Which most of those were not on the N64, which I think is Bomberman Hero's main saving grace, is if you were a person who had an N64 and not a PlayStation, once you ran out of the handful of really strong N64 platformers that the system is famous for. It had some very, very well-regarded sort of A-plus platformers. That Bomberman Hero is just kind of play me, I'm kind of a C.
Yeah.
And it's sweet, I guess now that I've finished all of these other games, I have no choice if I like platformers but to play Bomberman Hero, because that seems to be that's the market this game was playing to. It was just, you don't have a choice.
It's just kind of weird and misbegotten in this way. The original Bomberman formula had been pushed so far by this point, and I really do think, I've only recently started playing Saturn Bomberman, and it's just friggin' incredible. And I played Bomberman 64 around the time it came out, and I thought that was pretty good too. But it's a formula that did not change a whole hell of a lot, and they tried to do something, and yeah, they reskinned a bonk game, but it just seems totally misguided. And if this had just been named Random Character Platformer 4, maybe this wouldn't seem as offensive as it is, but they kind of dragged Bomberman into it, and that brings a certain expectation, not the least of which that there'd be some friggin' multiplayer in it. It's just the drizzling shits, man. It was said in chat, but I'll be the one to say it. It just, the cardinal sin, the original sin of this game, is that it's just kind of boring.
Yeah, it is just... I played this game when it was new. I own a copy of this game. I love Bomberman. I bought this game when it was, on shelves, because I'm like, Bomberman! I trust Bomberman to be good, and Bomberman betrayed the hell out of me in this one. I'm just like, I can never trust a Bomberman game again. I'm definitely not buying Bomberman 0, because that seems like a sure thing. The other thing is, this game barely uses Bomberman, as you implied. It uses Bomberman as he throws bombs, he kicks bombs, but there's almost no Bomberman in this game. Black Bomberman shows up for 2 seconds, and then at the end, there's some of the other colored Bombermen. And the rest of it could just be any other franchise. It makes no difference, because why have Bomberman? Why use all this stuff? And it's just it doesn't matter. I'm going to just immediately say I can't put this game higher than Gomala Speed. That's kind of the upper limit of where I would put this game moving on to ranking.
Yeah, we're in the right territory.
I would definitely put it below Glover, yeah. Glover at least had a cool concept.
I don't know if I'm with you, put it down in this area. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is literally unbeatable in some territories. You can get through Bomberman Hero, but it's gated in a really crummy way. So maybe I'm actually kind of comfortable putting it a little lower than that now that I think about it, because it does that bullshit hey, you think you've played through this game enough? Sorry. Especially, because I'm kind of interested in, finishing what I start. So if I'd gotten through this thing and gotten, a couple 4s along the way and then have the, realization that I need to go back and play more Bomberman Hero, I'd have probably thrown the damn thing in a dumpster.
The thing is, at least with I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, it's a compelling enough game that you'd be like, yeah, I do want to kind of see where this is going. I don't want to see what happens at the end of Bomberman Hero. At no point during this whole game am I like, wow, I really want to see what happens. No, I don't. I don't want to play any further.
Okay, that's a good point. You've... who wants to push it further?
Nah,
not me.
I really don't think the...
Oh, I mean down.
I don't really see anything it's better than on this list, except, let's see, and that's below Glover here.
Okay.
Definitely below Glover.
Yeah.
The thing that I would think with this game is, as Jeff said, I appreciate that Hudson went, okay, we have a really winning formula. Let's not use that and see if we can do something else with the franchise. I appreciate that. That's probably one of the only saving graces of this title. They did go out on a limb. This isn't, we screwed up a classic core Bomberman game. No, this is, we screwed up a weird little experiment that we kind of just didn't really know how to make good. So that's really its only saving grace.
I would put it right above King's Quest V, then. King's Quest V is just mean-spirited in ways that I don't think Bomberman Hero is. Bomberman Hero is just inept in this kind of sad way.
Yeah, it's inept, but doesn't outright hate you like a Sierra game does. Come on, man.
And, Firehawk is cut from a very, very roughly similar cloth in that it's just a bold experiment that just doesn't really lock it in any real way.
There's one more thing about Bomberman Hero that I'm just kind of wondering in the back of my head, and it's who at Hudson Soft decided that this game needed a cat dominatrix?
Well, it's interesting because obviously, generally they have a female Bomberman, like a foe. Generally, is a female like evil Bomberman in like every Bomberman story. There's a few evil bombers and one of them's a female.
Like, usually, evil bombers and stuff. But they're like, no, let's put cat dominatrix in this game instead of any other Bomberman.
Well, because all the male villain characters, it's like a giant sphinx thing, a fat bird with a laser gun. And then it's just cat dominatrix as the
with a spider robot.
I like the spider robot. I mean, I actually really like the bosses and the designs in this game, but because you basically have to cheese them, the whole thing screws them up. It's not great. I do think above King's Quest V might be right, because as much as we've sort of slandered this game, it is competent. If you're looking for a game that's surprisingly long, it's a really long game for what it is.
Oh boy!
And it's fairly unique and original. I don't think anyone on this planet needs to play this game, and they especially don't need to play it for more than an hour. But it kind of does fill a tiny little niche, and it did fill a proper niche in its time. And it doesn't hate you. In some ways, it just wants you to be a little bored. But other than that, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Really matter. Does anyone really want to push it lower than King's Quest V?
No, I am not pushing it lower than King's Quest V. It doesn't deserve that.
No, it doesn't deserve that, yeah.
I'm okay with where it is.
We are definitely locking it in, and that's going between Firehawk and above King's Quest V. Thank you, Bomberman Hero, for existing.
So when do we get the coverage of Second Attack?
I don't think anyone's going to nominate Second Attack.
Screw it, then I will.
If you're a fan of something, you don't have to make an entire game about it. You can help other people do it by going on patreon.com/HG101 and helping us make this podcast by giving us a small monthly donation. For some reason, like when my favorite podcast, which provides me with over 4 hours of brand new content each month, asks me to chip in something like $3, $5 a month, I immediately think, I don't have that kind of money. I can enjoy podcasts for free, therefore any money I spend on them is money wasted, right? But then I had this great experience of meeting one of my favorite podcast hosts in person. This was about maybe a year and a half ago. And afterwards, I realized that although I just bought the guy a couple beers without hesitation, I hadn't been willing to donate anything to his Patreon to help him just pay his bills and keep the show on the air. So because of that, I immediately after that, just having met him in person made me realize that I should be contributing just a little bit of something. And it feels good. I can't afford to donate money to every podcast I listen to because I listen to a lot of them, as you probably guessed. But there are a few shows that I really look forward to each week because they feel like they were just kind of like made just for me. And for those shows, I try to kick back a couple bucks their way each month through Patreon because I know that if I met those people in person, I'd feel guilty about having not chipped in. If the Top 47K Games show is one of those shows for you, if you'd really miss us if we suddenly disappeared, you should consider going to patreon.com/HG101 and sign up to donate a few bucks a month. You'll feel good and you will help us out and you'll get some cool stuff on top of that. In fact, any amount you give gives you access to ad-free versions of this show, plus an exclusive bonus segment every now and then. And at the $5 a month pledge level, you'll get PDF copies of the 3 most recent HG101 books, which I believe right now includes like a Taito book. And you'll get PDFs of all upcoming books when they're released for as long as you're a subscriber. So something to think about, food for thought. Now back to the show.
Okay, our next game is Transarctica, developed and published by Silmarillus, which I think that name is supposed to be French, so I probably mangled that horribly. It was released on the Amiga, and it was also released on the PC and a couple of other systems, I think, at the time, probably the Atari ST. It's a PC game, but it was originally developed for the Amiga. Mm-hmm. Its earliest release date, we're not 100% sure. It was reviewed in March in 1993 in Europe, so mid-1993, early 1993 is probably the most accurate release date for Transarctica. And it was nominated to us by Atkinson 2. Transarctica is a game where you play as a rebellious train conductor in the post-apocalyptic future where the world is covered in ice. which in this year of 2017, the idea that the world would be a frozen wasteland in the future is incredibly hilarious to me. But that's the plot of the game, and you get to ride your train around and trade with things. Somebody else take it away.
So this game
One thing
is basically FTL by way of Snowpiercer in a very strange way. FTL may not be the best point. Someone, I think it was Bob, actually raised it's got some Oregon Trail in there.
Actually, thinking about it, I want to redact that a bit.
Okay.
I would see a little more of a Sid Meier's Pirates in there.
Yeah, okay.
So, one thing very quickly, I just want to say, we need to get this out of the way just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to the main menu in this game, you need to go to your desk, pick up a gun, and shoot yourself with it.
Yeah.
That's how you quit the game.
And it gives you a game over, too, and it's not a happy game over, unsurprisingly.
This game is tonally bleak as hell. It's while we're airing dirty laundry, it is absolutely 100% unavoidable necessary to get to a win condition in this game that you're going to engage in some slavery.
The slavery, and it just kind of happens. It's just like, oh, you want some slaves? Okay, good, have some slaves. Cool, I got some slaves. Like, there's no... it is a little bit... The theme is constantly pumped at you, but some of the things like slavery are very much just kind of glossed over. It's you have some slaves, and you use the slaves, and there's no other... You don't get to click the slave car, because the game is... You conduct a train, and you actually buy separate train cars that store slaves and people and other items and perishables and things. You don't actually get to click on the slave car and see like a room of suffering people.
You're not necessarily wallowing in the very dark, actually very dark elements of human nature that are buried in this game, but they are present as kind of a wallpaper for it.
It's
in a way
interesting that way because it's
full disclosure.
You could have made this game like super, super dark, and it just kind of hovers above that, where it's mostly you just look at a map of train stations and tell your train to go in this vague direction and try and mine things and go to towns and trade resources and stuff. But if you read the context of the game, and I assume that the French story that this is based on, which is a science fiction series, I believe, of novels, I assume that is very dark, or at least darker than the game. And yes, Snowpiercer was based on the same series. Snowpiercer did not steal this game's plot. Just in case anyone's wondering, no, they're both based on the same French French book series. I didn't read it. I don't speak French. I'm sure there's an English translation, but I haven't read it, to be perfectly honest.
So,
but
the thing is, you do have a vague goal in this game, but it doesn't really tell you where to start. You're just getting this huge map and just kind of just let off to do your own thing and just try and figure out any kind of idea of what to do.
And there is some of the
vague.
There is some of the actual Sid Meier's Pirates thing where so your train will travel between towns and you'll be purchasing resources to basically go flip elsewhere to gather more currency, which it should be noted. You're riding a train, and it is a coal-powered train, and the economy of this world is based on anthracite and lignite, the two different types of coal that are generally used. And I forget which is the more refined one, but basically the cleaner burning, more efficient coal is the only currency that is left in this 28th century frozen hellscape of Earth that is left. So
I believe you stumbled briefly there. The currency one is not as powerful as the non-currency one.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's Octanite is the one that you can't spend. It can only put it in the oven, and it's the one that you start with less of, and it lasts a little longer. I think maybe the manual was wrong, because I read the manual. I didn't check anyone else's opinions on that. And yeah, the other one, Lightenite, is the trading one. Yeah. And yes, you can burn your money to power your train, which I absolutely love. That you just because you actually have to tell the shoveling guys to shovel. So you actually go to the carriage, see the carriage with the shoveling guys, and you click on them, and they start shoveling your money into the furnace, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, there's a man standing on the left of the furnace and a man on the right, and if you click the man on the left, that is throwing money into a fire. So be very careful. And if you were just so that the menus are weirdly skeuomorphic in a lot of parts of this game, actually, but that conductor's room is like very much like, I'm going to tell this man to shovel coal, and I'm going to open up a throttle and start pressurizing a boiler so my train will go, and then you can leave that room and start poking around on the map screen and doing other things, and that can overpressurize your boiler of your train, and then you will blow up and die. So there's kind of some expected knowledge of rudimentary, like, boiler engineering in this game.
How do you
that seems totally nuts.
How do you stop from getting too hot? You just have to stop the train, let it cool? Or?
No, you just go. You tell them to stop shoveling.
The train.
Yeah,
Jesus.
No. You just go back into that room and just click him again, and he'll stop shoveling. But then it depressurizes over time, so it's this constant it's very parts of this game have got some problems, but like the part of it where it expects you to actually kind of make a train go.
I love it. I love this. Just the general the idea is that it's trying to wear you down in some places. So the idea that you click the guy, and then you carefully monitor him, and then you're like, okay, we're almost overheating. Stop shoveling. Mm-hmm. The idea is that at some point you'll be like, nah, it'll be fine. I'll just leave him shoveling, and then I'll go to the map and I'll quickly do some things, and then you'll forget, and then he'll just be like, okay, I'm gonna keep shoveling, and then you'll just blow up your own train. Like, what? No, crap! Damn it! And I like that the game tries to get you sometimes, and. Yeah. There's other ways it gets you. There are random events that can occur in the game, and it'll actually warn you. And the train siren will be like, as you approach a random thing that can happen. So if you really don't want to hit it, you can actually throw the train in reverse and be like, nope, forget that. We're going the other way. Come on, people. Because you're going to obviously go one of two directions.
You probably want to do that, too, because this game is combat, but it's not very good.
Yeah.
Don't get into combat if you can help it, especially if you don't have... You need, several guns, preferably several mammoths, because there are mammoths in this game, and probably no less than, 30, 40 soldiers. I don't know how many you'd really want, but combat sucks. It's probably the weakest part of this game.
How would you even describe... so your train moves parallel to another train, and, well, I guess it makes some sense, because trains are going...
It's like the worst version of Raideen ever created.
Yeah. Okay. And then and in between those trains, then you can be moving foot soldiers between out of the barracks car, and that is a very
pseudo RTS sort of.
Yeah, it's kind of like cannon fodder, but with instead of in real time, you're kind of sending individual march forward and then climb up this train car, and then there's a single dude can represent any number of soldiers. So if you send up your little platoon of 10 dudes over to a train and climb up on top of your opponent's train because you see a man up there you'd like to make go away, that could be 10 dudes, that could be 40 dudes. So you could just get your shit beaten.
I didn't succeed in doing that, but yes, that's kind of confusing. They don't even do a different... I don't know, because the Amiga can do it. I might have personally tried to just at least change the saturation so that, something to tell you that there's more dudes in that particular square. It is actually, you did say FTL, and it is actually an apt comparison, because that train is your train, and the layout of the train in the combat matches your layout. So you're actually supposed to think smart and put, your cannons and your machine guns kind of in the middle of the train, maybe one at the front so that it protects your main carriage from... The enemy can send random guys to your train, and if they blow up the front carriage, the one that you're in, instant game over. So be careful about that. You don't want that to happen.
Man, this game has a lot of ways to lose, doesn't it?
It does. It's kind of a son of a bitch, man.
But it fits the game, I wouldn't want the game to be coddle you, essentially, because a vast majority of this game is just okay, so there are tiny towns of people that kind of sustain themselves trading on train tracks, and everything is horrible. You can get spies, and the only reason spies sign up with you is if you have a luxury carriage for them to hang in while, when they're not on a mission, they just hang out in this, glorious luxury cabin. And you don't have to pay them. They're just no, let me live in luxury, and I will do whatever you want. That's how bad the world has gotten.
Yeah. To be fair, you can also throw it back at the game, so if you dig around for information on this game on the World Wide Web, there's not a whole hell of a lot, but there's a series of YouTube videos posted by a very polite German gentleman working on English as he's doing them, And he points out this really, really, really good exploit early, which I wasn't able to replicate because I think this game is somewhat random in nature. But it was apparently reliable for him, where basically you go to what is basically North Africa and purchase furs at this ridiculous, 2 pieces of coal price, and just a bunch of, basically warehouse carts, and just fill them with furs, and then head up to Amsterdam, and you could flip those 2 coal furs for, 60 coal. And then suddenly you're just, loaded, and it's well, okay, good. And then you just go buy 6 cannons, and you buy a barracks, and you buy an Alcatraz car, and then you just go fight trains for a while, and, there's some behaviors of this game that I think are kind of manipulatable to definitely aid yourself. And I don't know. I have a harder and harder time as I get older, avoiding those things, because it's in the game. It's not like I went into and did some sick console commands. I'm just using what's here.
I do think it's a 1993 Amiga game. This game wasn't going to get patched unless you put it in your Amiga and it caused your Amiga to actually explode. That would be the only circumstance they would be like, all right, we'll make another version. Calm down. So it does definitely. There were elements that kind of needed a second pass if you wanted to go that way, and fix these particular problems. Which I do think that's it's an exploit. You don't have to use it if you really don't want to. But that's it's in there. It's whatever. You probably won't figure it out by accident. Unless you play the game a lot. And if you get that good at the game, it doesn't really matter if you kind of figure out the kind of ins and outs, which you do have to do. You probably have to play this game a couple of dozen times, I think, to really solidly work out a good strategy. And there's some cool stuff, you can buy a missile cart, which lets you fire missiles on the map, which is cool. And you just have to know where the enemy train cars are via, sending spies out and actually finding the enemy train cars so that you can launch a missile relatively accurately on them, that's really cool. And there's some other sort of elements in there that are just this is cool. The map you're using is inaccurate because it's just it's like a generic map they give to captains. So some of the bridges are out. There's trash all over the tracks. Things are broken. And you don't know because you're just working off a regular map. And it's well, they didn't fix that. They didn't update that. So forget it.
To tie this back to, that does do that thing that to get to kind of the what the hell are you actually doing in this game? It does kind of do the Sid Meier's Pirates thing where you'll go into these towns and you'll have somewhat procedurally generated conversations with people where they're kind of explaining, it's oh, I've heard that this, guy who claims he can look through the sky and see the sun occasionally is up in these mountains, and he's detonated all these tracks over here, and it kind of gives you some breadcrumbs of okay, well, I think there's some semblance of a story. I just need to get to this part of the map.
The breadcrumbs are just really hard to find. Even harder than something like Star Control 2, which kind of said you should go to this star or you should go to this system, or kind of gave you a name that you could maybe find. Whereas the world of this game is, it doesn't look like normal Earth. So when they sort of tell me to go to Transylvania, I'm I don't know where Transylvania is.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking real quick. I feel like this game would actually really could do with a good remake, because there's a great concept here of trading and exploration, and maybe you could even work the combat a bit. I just feel like the best thing you could do is do what that remake of Sid Meier's Pirates did. Add some more mini games, some more things to do. Maybe you could send your guys out into the snow to do missions and such.
Yeah,
I think there was something there.
Something that a game that we looked at, an indie game called Fear Equation, did. But that game was a train game that played more like Oregon Trail, interestingly. But yeah, there's a lot of things that would basically be, someone please take another crack at Transarctica, because it really deserves it.
I think you could even sprinkle in some of the remakes of XCOM into it, honestly, and maybe not so much the combat necessarily, but just the base building and kind of, or even maybe even some of the combat. I don't know, but yeah, just something else. This game, a second pass with this would be okay. And if you want to fiddle around with it, there is a pretty much abandoned SourceForge project to kind of rebuild this thing from scratch, and maybe you could drag that in some cool new direction. But
I do find that interesting, because you mentioned the new XCOM, and that's pretty accurate, that this game could really use something that just grabs it, says, there's a lot of great ideas in here, but if we make it slightly more approachable, it'll actually be really fun.
Yeah.
Not that I think the original XCOM is not fun, But that game does hit you like a ton of bricks with just stuff that you just gotta get through to really begin to properly enjoy it. Because this game doesn't have any sort of features that this, like, combat you can kind of just dig out, like, from a normal game. Because it's like, yeah, you go there, you shoot your gun. Like, that, you can get these things. Working out how to be a train conductor captain in a completely almost alien version of Earth, which just doesn't really fit any of your regular sort of paradigms for what you do. Is like, I don't even know where to start. I really don't. They don't give you anything in this game. I love it. You just start on a train, and it's just like, it doesn't say anything. It's just
This game is more than happy not to help you at all. Which, if we were to slowly segue into, if we were to reverse engines here and back this thing onto the list of games, I don't, like, looking at my hallmark of middle of the list of, like, is just good, which is Donkey Kong Country 3, for those who are curious, I can't decide if I want to put this above or below that. So help me out.
I would say go above Donkey Kong Country 3, because originality, that's still important to me.
Yeah, I love the theming in this game, like, a lot. Like, it's
very
want to play
evocative,
more.
and I love a game's diegetic interfaces like that, where all of your options are like things that you can actually see on your screen, like you were there.
Like, I do think this game's biggest failing is that it was made in 1993 for the Amiga. Like, it's not its fault that it's not a modern game with modern conveniences. That's, they can make games be more approachable now, and it was a lot harder to do that. Especially this game, because this is just like, what? This is so out of left field for an Amiga game, too. Sure. Like, you expect junked up platformers and stuff, and then it's just like, no, here's a super complicated trading game. It's like, what?
Yeah, even some tooltips would be, like, clutch in this game, and they just aren't there.
There's only a handful. Like, the game thankfully will explain some elements that if you try and do something you can't do, the game will tell you why. I'm like, oh, thank goodness you'll tell me why I can't do this, because at least I can eke out something. I mean, I do think it does deserve a little bit. I think sometimes we're a little harsh on kind of experimental late 80s, early 90s sort of Western games, because those games kind of, they get put through the ringer a lot because they always shoot really high and then they shoot themselves in the foot at the same time. I don't know, maybe they jump up really high and shoot themselves through the foot at the same time kind of deal. So
okay, so how about this? How about we put it directly below Wendy Every Which Way?
All right.
Yeah, like I was looking around that general sort of field. I'm just gonna think back to sort of G.I. Joe and Star Tropics, and I think Transarctica basically carries itself up with its theme.
Yeah,
that's
it's
really
a deeply flawed thing in a lot of ways, but like you can kind of see what they were trying to do, and I want to give them a lot of credit for that. And like it should be noted, this game is like still available in some form today commercially. Like you can go buy it from .mu, the people who are doing that. God, is it the Dragon's Trap remake right now for like $3? So like, I hope that there's some market for this thing for people who want to go out and find it. I want to see a second crack at this so bad, but at the same time, it is not kind to you as you are dipping your toes in. Like, it's immediately, viscerally kind of a mean-spirited and goes in some pretty dark places, like we kind of came out with up front.
Like, I think the thing is, like, this game, I just don't know if anyone will do it, because it's just such a... Is this game going to justify, like, would people line up out the door to be like, yeah, I got to play Transarctica 2, it's going to be great. It's
but
like,
they don't
I don't know.
have to, because it could go on Steam for like $20 and sell 20,000 copies. And...
like, I don't want to drag it up again, but, someone like the FTL guys, if they tried to tackle this game, I think they could do a phenomenal job of sort of etching out a good game out of it. Sorry, it is a good game. Etching out a all-time classic, because Transarctica is that. It is a diamond in the rough. This game could easily shoot super high if it was kind of figured itself out perfectly. Star Control 2 sort of tier. It could just be like, wow, this game really works.
Like,
and
just think of if FTL had actually had some trade mechanics in it. Like, just because like they just kind of similar. Like, you're kind of being pursued by an oppressive, like, tyrannical force in this game in a way. not necessarily coaxing you forward in the way that FTL is, but like there's a lot of overlap in there, like a weird amount, which kind of makes me wonder if maybe the FTL people had heard of this in some ways. But I
mean, this is definitely something like if you're from Europe, I'd be like, if you made a game even vaguely like this, I'd be like, did you play Transarctica? Because I think this game would have been pretty popular in 1993 in just Amiga users and even DOS because it found its way there. So it seems like there would be a fan base hiding somewhere for this game, and I recommend people play this. I don't know how you would get into playing it because it's read the manual, and the manual's not super easy to read either. But just try. It's worth at least checking out, and it's not necessarily gonna win you over, but you should play it, and you will probably feel like, oh yeah, I see why they want this game to be better.
As for me, it does feel unique. I can't deny that. I just wish there was more game there, and maybe a little less waiting, a little more agency, I guess.
Don't forget, if you click the clock in the bottom left, it will speed up your time, and if you don't know that and you try and play this game, you're gonna be like, wow, that was really dumb.
Oh yeah.
But yes, you can speed up your time, and it has these little elements. They clearly thought about these things. Just like, let them speed up time. Yeah, give them these tool tips to warn them about this. They tell you where the mines are in the game that are being randomly spawned, because those are randomly placed. And it'll actually show on the map where it tells you where they are. There's all this nice little stuff where it tries. But then at the same time, it just punches you in the dick repeatedly, and the combat's not very good. So, bye game.
And thank you. Also, totally unrelated, check out Snowpiercer. It's pretty good. It's also got some problems, but it's all right.
I guess saying that, if you watch Snowpiercer and think, boy, this should be a game.
Yeah.
Hey,
they made it.
They made it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to Derek B9 Aura and Atkinson2 on Twitter for nominating those games. And thanks to those of you we didn't get to yet, we will be getting to you soon. Thanks as well to my lovely co-hosts and co-patriots, our editor Jeff Rude, our theme song composer Muteki, and of course the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HD101, by subscribing to the Hardcore Gaming 101 YouTube channel, and by following @GC9X and @HG_101 on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HD101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or we'll develop our own misbegotten solution to global warming with chemistry. Until next week, keep keeping it real.